He was a general leading more than half of Brahm's forces against Farahorn. Fahoran, Fahoran, Pharaoh, Fahoran, Fahoran, Fahoran. Alrighty, welcome back, any and everybody. This is Linen Otter, here to do another episode of Kingsguard. Last we left off, we were just in the middle of what I think might have been a dream sequence. Or maybe we were teleported to someplace scary. We'll have to find out. As you approached one of the aisles and looked up at the bookshelf, you couldn't even see the top. It seemed to stretch on for eternity. Each book had varying thickness, but all were nearly a foot thick, easily twice the size of codexes or larger. You couldn't even begin to imagine how many books there were in this library, and what was contained within. Curiosity got the better of you as you struggled to remove one from the shelf. How much does this thing weigh? There was no table for you to set it down upon, so you dropped it on the ground with a resonating thump and glossed over it. It was well worn, but was clearly sturdy enough to not fall apart in your hands. With the size of the book, it was a surprise it even held together. Devereaux Carrel, Volume 28. Volume 28? How many of these are there? As you stared back up, you saw that the Devereaux collection seemed to span the entirety of the shelf, going all the way back to Volume 1, and ending several rows above at Volume 48. The books following after the final named volume didn't seem to have a name, but they were so high up you couldn't hope to reach them and peek at what was inside. You cracked open the book in front of you and found the ink was slightly faded and not enough to give you trouble. You found the ink was slightly faded and not enough to give you trouble reading. Running, trees, daughter, trouble, hiding, move again. Birds, trail found, running, wagon, stay low. What is this? Even as you skipped a few pages, the writing was the same style of short and concise sentences with little exposition. You turned the book over, looking at the back to find some sort of author. Nothing? Who would want to read something like this? It was a strange book, a fitting decoration to this odd and eerie place. Things just keep getting creepier by the minute. You attempted to set the novel back onto the shelf, but you had little luck even being able to lift it off the ground. It must have easily weighed several dozen pounds. It was a miracle you managed to get it out. The sound of the rustling paper began anew, causing you to nearly jump in fright. Is someone else there? I've never seen a modern horror movie, so I don't think this is a problem to ask who's there. You knew you weren't alone. Someone else was here. Why they weren't answering, you didn't know, but you couldn't just sit still and remain in the dark. Very well, I'll have to come to you, it seems. You moved onwards, ignoring the book and following the sound until at last it became clear. As you turned the corner where you believed the noise to be coming from, you found no one there. Hello? You kept your voice lower this time. Something about this place didn't sit well with you. If there's anyone here, I just want to let you know that I'm not here to hurt you. I just want to know where I am. No one answered back, but nobody came, but no one came. If this is a joke, it's not funny. Oh, a choice. Okay. I'm gonna sneak towards the sound. Although I feel like these reveal something. Again, this is a dating simulator at the end of the day, right? I don't know if that's the main focus, but there's something about these options that seems strange to me. They're very different approaches, but they seem to relate to the people that we might already know. Sneaking around makes me think of Koshiro, because of, his habits. Running towards the sounds, charging straight forward, seems like somebody very rhino-hearted might do. And walking towards the sound shows a bit of bravery, but also a sense of caution and, level-headed thinking that would probably best suit somebody who is a bit more leader-like. So we're gonna walk towards the sound. Eventually you would catch whoever was playing tricks on you. It would just be a matter of time. Perhaps they would get bored and stop running away. Regardless, they clearly weren't going to wait for you, so you started off towards the sound again. Alright, I think I got them now. You peeked your head around the bookcase, but yet again there was nobody. You moved out of the aisle and scoured around, seeing if there was anyone in hiding, and listening for the sounds of footsteps, yet you were all alone. You moved out of the aisle and scoured around, seeing if there was anyone in hiding, and listening for the sounds of footsteps, yet you were all alone. I made that choice just because I feel like, I don't know, he didn't seem scared. Linnaeus doesn't seem scared yet, so I don't think he'd sneak around. But he's not bold that he'd still run. I think walking is just kind of whatever. These tricksters were beginning to drive you insane. The maze-like structure of this library was slowly eating at you. You had already traveled so far, yet there was no exit in sight. Where the hell am I? Holy what? Ah! Oh, okay. Just relax. It's only a statue. Still, your feet moved. You felt compelled to creep closer. A strange sort of curiosity befell you as you brought your hand up to touch the bust's face. It was lifelike, almost too lifelike. Were it not pale and lacking in color, anyone would... it was lifelike, almost too lifelike. Were it not pale and lacking in color, anyone could have mistook it for an actual person. Why do I feel as though I know you? Wait, what? The bookshelf behind it was empty except for a single book. It was thin, unlike the others that you had seen before, with what looked like a single page contained within them. Leandros, Volume 1. This name. Why do I know this name? As you opened the book to the first and only page, you noticed but a single word written at the top. The print was tiny and smeared, forcing you to squint to make it out. Birth? Oh my gosh! The cries of seagulls and the blinding light of the sun shook you from your slumber. Your heart pounded heavily and a bit painfully, as though it were some tiny inmate trying to claw its way out. You breathed in slow and exhaled just as calmly until your beating quelled. Whew. You checked your timer, your alarm clock, and realized that it wasn't even on. So in your anxiety-ridden sweat, you reached over and set the timer. What the heck was that? Nobody told me this game was going to be scary. Oh, I haven't had a dream that bizarre in years. Ugh. A burning sensation came up from the back of your throat, and you did all you could to push it back down. It left a displeasing taste at the back of your tongue. Oh, I really need to stop drinking an hour before bed. A gale blew the curtains wide open, letting more sunlight in. You caught glimpses of the sea beyond your window. You got up and stumbled out towards the balcony. Still feeling groggy, you rested your body along the doorway and scanned the horizon. Oh wait, go back. You put your thoughts of the strange dream aside and focused on the ship sailing far out in the ocean. It was approaching the sea gate, an outcropping of rocks that served as a natural barrier for your city from invaders approaching by ship. There were only 2 areas with enough breadth between the rocks to allow ships through, and they were heavily guarded by your nation's own fleet. None entered the bay without inspection first, unless they planned to force their way through, which would likely mean certain death, even for the most skilled seafarer. Where are you guys? So many days had passed since you last heard from your aunt and uncle. They sent out a letter a month back, telling you of their return from a long excursion across Torvair, and how they would be arriving before your birthday. Oh. Where are you guys? They were the only 2 members of your family you had hoped would have made it to your celebration. They were far from conceited or selfish as your other relatives. Had it not been for your lineage to the crown, you likely would have sailed off with them long ago. Long, long ago. But as the days leading up to your birthday passed, you became increasingly worried. I suppose there is always next year. You retreated back inside and took your time getting dressed. You went back over to your bedside table and lifted a silver crown, turning it around in your hand before placing it back down. As a kid, you were excited to wear that crown. Every day you'd parade the halls, proud and happy as can be with that thing upon your head, singing, "Oh, I just can't wait to be king." For some reason, you felt as though it lost its luster and charm, or maybe it just never was that special to begin with.
Sire, I've come to let you know that it is far past rising time. Breakfast is already prepared and your father is waiting for your arrival.
Very few ever came to fetch you from your room unless your father requested it. You grimaced a little. Your stomach still ached from last night, and the last thing you needed was to add on to the turmoil that was going on inside. Knowing your father, he probably would scold you for not finishing everything on the plate.
Are you awake, sire?
Yeah. The steps eventually recede from the door, and you head out, yawning. Ooh. Had it been any other day, the smells that wafted through the dining room would have made your mouth water. Today, it only churned your gut even more. Your father was nose deep in the paper and didn't seem to have noticed you. On the cover was a story about some kind of religious turmoil in Brennigan, the capital of Braum. They have papers in this timeline, and they have trains, so this is definitely modern. This feels like 1800s-ish? I think they have newspapers in the 1800s. Is my ignorance in history showing? You sat yourself at the opposite end of the table from your father and half expected him to say something. Instead, he just ruffled his paper and flipped to a new page. You reached for a goblet of water and slowly sipped to stall. You reached for a goblet of water and slowly sipped to stall. You reached for a goblet of water and slowly sipped to stall talking for as long as possible. Somehow you knew he was waiting for you to say the first word. Probably something about being sorry for being so late, or about last night's incident with Angela.
Your Majesty, the first course.
A plate of food filled to the rim was placed before you. You spit out the water you were drinking, and thankfully most of it landed in the goblet. The thought of having more than one course was enough to make you throw up.
Learn to keep your food in your mouth. I'm sure I must have taught you better.
He kept his face hidden behind the paper as he spoke. His face still hidden, one of the servants handed you a napkin, and you wiped the water from your chin and clothes. Before you could reply, he went on.
And late again to a meal.
At least he didn't bring up,
and did you really think there would be no repercussions to your actions with Lord Bennett's daughter?
Hey, she just kept on drinking.
I told her she didn't have to. Your father put down his paper and glared at you.
Do not try to pin this on her. I know you had a hand in her actions. You've not only embarrassed me, but also her family in front of everyone. I had to apologize graciously for your blunder.
You sighed and rested your elbows on the table, one hand holding up your head and the other held a fork that you began to stab and swirl the food on the plate.
And another thing. Leandros told me of your little game of hounds and muggers with him. You know how dangerous it is out there, and you still refuse to listen to reason.
I can't help it if you keep me locked in all the damn time. When will you stop treating me like some bird in a cage?
Around the time you learn to listen to your elders and grow up!
The dining room hall door was opened once more and another guest arrived. You turned to see who gave you the honor of ruining such a joyful breakfast with your dear father. The fox moved in great strides. He was practically running. He looked exhausted, as though he had come all the way from the city gates just to get here. He took to your father's side and whispered in his ear. You were too far away to make out anything as they talked in hushed tones. Your father's eyes went wide for a second. He looked anxious, or perhaps even frightened. With him, it was always hard to tell, but you knew it was likely some troublesome news. Their talk was brief, and Koshiro was already heading out. Your father began to excuse himself from the table.
We'll talk more later.
Despite the look on his face, he still had the composure to neatly fold his paper and push in his own chair.
And remove your elbows from the table.
He left the room at a brisk pace, leaving you alone with the servants.
Sire, your food is going to get cold.
Your plate was still full, having been relatively untouched, but to be honest, you weren't feeling very hungry. It only took a few bites before you had enough, and surely you would regret it later with a grumbling and pained belly, but with being a prince, a quick snack was just a servant's call away. You thanked the chef for the meal and asked for it to be delivered to the less fortunate on the streets, though you doubted they would do that and likely toss it in the alleyway. You were back on track to the monotony of your daily life. I don't know what it is, but this episode seems to be a little bit more fast-paced. Your teacher, Maestro Correo, was a dutiful scholar and scribe for the crown. He was a kind man whose knowledge far exceeded your own, and was the one who also taught your father and your grandfather. To you, his wisdom was unbound, but even though you looked up to him, he was one of the harshest mentors you had. Even with how busy he was in preparing for the upcoming coronation, he still found time to hammer in lessons, and today was just as arduous.
I know that you...
What's an Italian accent? I know that you are busy, but this is no
I know that you are busy, but that is no excuse to skirt your lessons. I hope you have been reading those books I asked you to.
I guess he would be technically a lot older. You groaned. Hours of your day were spent under his brutal tutelage. At times he was more fierce than your father. Correo had a tendency to overwork your mind more than even Leandros did with swordplay lessons. It was just over a week ago that he gave you 10 books to read and memorize. Had you not already been an avid reader, it would likely have been an impossible task, but that didn't make it any less daunting. Today, his lessons seemed to be even more tedious than before. Every other word he said became lost in your head. The diagrams in the books open before you played out epic fights on their pages, and you found your notes filled with drawings of whatever popped into your head, rather than on what to memorize.
Linnaeus! You better not be daydreaming there!
Your eyes shot open and you scrambled to cover up a small sketch in the corner of your notes.
No, I'm awake.
Are you now? You brought a hand over your mouth and slyly covered a yawn.
As you should have read, at least I hope, approximately 30 battles took place over Torveo during the Third Era. Halfway through the war, Pharaoh had managed to overtake had managed to take over and assimilate the nations of Seon and Keskal, both known for their prowess in war. Braum, or at the time Bragand, forced the nations Ekile, Esile, and Huadrea into submission. With the damage they had taken, their rulers were given a choice to join and fight with Bragand or die. They accepted, of course, taking into account the safety of their citizens, but at the cost of losing their nationality and becoming Brahmish civilians with rights above those of slaves, but less than the natives. And lastly, here in Yasan, Damania requested asylum as their nation was soon to be a battlefield. Here in Yasan, Damania requested asylum as their nation was soon to be a battlefield between Pharaohorn and Brahm. But as soon as the war was over, Daminia was forced to give up their name and banner and joined Yasan. Yes. Good to know that you have been reading. Torveir went from having 8 nations to 3. Even after the war ended, the hardships were just starting, even with the gods promising peace and prosperity from then on. Because of the war, many of the inventions, technology, knowledge, and history of the nations was lost, as if we had to start from the ground up. It was a long war, and most of the battles that took place were never recorded. It was only the final battle in the Canyon of Death that was documented, and even then, we only have scraps to piece together what happened. But most excerpts from that era appear to hail one man as the hero of the world, despite the war ending with the gods' intervention. Alexander Belisarius, right? He was the general leading more than half of Brahm's forces against Pharaohorn. Fahoran. The books you gave painted him as a corrupt general, though. There are 2 sides to every coin. Many know of Alexander and his feats and deeds. He has songs and statues praising him, while others depicted him as a wicked being. There is no denying that he was a master tactician, though. Even Leandros has studied his strategies. Whether or not he was considered evil for commanding his troops and slaughtering thousands is a question of morality. At the time, he simply obeyed his orders from the king of Bragand. It was a time of war, if for lack of a better word to say of the horrors during that era. All nations fought with the same underhanded tactics, so pointing fingers as to who was more cruel is meaningless. If anyone was to be considered the villain of this war, it would have been King Silas of Bragand. The war likely would have still started, with tensions between humans and beastmen becoming alarmingly unstable due to inequality, but perhaps not as soon or as ferociously were it not for the king's initial attack. Now, as far as the tales go, Alexander is the only individual that most seem to take note as he fought against Fairhaven during the battle in the Valley of Death. Farhoran. Against Farhoran. But on the other side, we had someone equally as important to the war. A beastman general led the Farhoran forces, but he is very rarely mentioned in history books. He too had many notable accomplishments, but being that he was a beastman and from Farhoran, not many wrote about him, seeing as most writers at the time were humans. That and the last stigma of the war kept many from wanting to glorify him. It also didn't help that most Farhorans weren't as literate as they are today because of slavery. Tell me, Linnaeus, are you able to tell me what this beastman's name was? What was the beastman's name who led Farhoran's forces against the Brahmish at the Valley of Death? Has this knowledge been made known to me before? This name doesn't sound familiar at all. Take your time. Most scholars don't even know this. Hey, I'm trying. Mikhail? That name sounds familiar, but so does Edmund. This name doesn't sound familiar at all, I think. Mikhail of Dunforton? It was a good guess, but he was important to the war, but the answer I was looking for was Doran the Breaker. Oh man. Oh, I feel embarrassed. That name didn't come out of anywhere. You could say this was a trick question. Actually, out of those books I gave you to read, he isn't mentioned in a single one of them. Oh, okay, very good. I think I do recall him, actually. I'm sure I've read about him from somewhere. Let's see. Wild Grayson's Last Drop of Blood. Ah, so you've gone even so far as to have read that one. I must say, if it wasn't you we were talking about, I would have been surprised to know you had even heard of that hidden gem. It was always difficult back at the academy to get any of my students to read it. Most of the professors seem to deny its existence as well. The nerve of them, and they call themselves academics. I really enjoyed it myself. Out of all the books, it was the only one to attempt to have an objective view on the war. The level of detail was astonishing. Beastman wrote it, correct? Yes. I had the pleasure of meeting with Mr. Grayson many years ago. It is a shame that many of the books he wrote were burned by maniacs declaring his works as heresy. Thankfully, many historians saw the value of the knowledge contained inside and hid as many of them as they could. But if you have read his book, let me test your memory once more. What? Getting back onto the trail, can you tell me what species of animal Doran was likened to? More quizzes. Correal simply leered. Oh, what was Doran the Breaker's species? How am I supposed to know that? Is this knowledge that was told to me before? Let me pause this timer here. I'm tempted to Google, but I wouldn't do that. Am I supposed to? I guess you can tell me in the comments. Was I supposed to know this? Because this is news to me. I feel like I feel like I don't have a single frame of reference for this. It's not even multiple choice. I was gonna say at least with multiple choice. I mean, there's an infinite amount of species. Like what is this? Okay, Doran the Breaker, likened. He probably wasn't this species, or is it actually? I mean, I guess it doesn't really matter. I mean, I want to say like, oh, he was strong. Maybe he was like an ox because he was a fierce leader. But what does that have to do with it? You know, like in this world, animals are their own people. So it's like an ox can be timid, or a fox can be, you know, not so smart, or jeez. Let's just say, what's a really fierce creature? A wolverine. It would be wrong of me to assume you know everything, wouldn't it? Ah. Well, no matter. What species he was isn't as important as his role in the war. Somebody tell me in the comments, please, whatever. The day continued to drag on long after Cordeo's lessons. You'd struggled to keep your eyes open, and you wanted to rest, but your duties dragged you on by the leash. Despite how busy you were, you expected your father to check up on you, but not once did he appear. Even the servants didn't have a clue where he had vanished to. Still, it was nice to spend a few hours away from him. Although you were glad that he was absent, it also meant that you had to pick up his work before it piled up. When you were younger, it was the worst sort of torture. Stacks of paper at his desk needed to be read, signed, and stamped with insignia, and that was only the beginning. After sitting in his study for an hour, or even up to half a day, you then had to meet in the throne room for the hearing. There you were made to listen to the demands of the people and give the right course of advice or action to resolve issues. One by one, you moved down the list of commoners, lords, or barons who would arrive and clamor over their problems with the utmost exaggeration. With how fervent their concerns were, you'd have thought the world was soon to end should their demands not be met within a reasonable time. Some issues were quite serious and took the collective minds of your court to resolve. Other times, they were about petty problems that made you roll your eyes so far back you could see your brain. Since when was a missing cow an urgent matter that required your presence? Very well, very well. I shall send a soldier to look over the matter. Oh, thank you. My Sarah means so much to me. The farmer got down on his knees and put his hands together as though in prayer. I assume that is all? The man looked up and nodded.
He tried to take a step forward, but several guards stood in his way, likely taking it as a threat.
Oh, when she comes back, you must try her milk. I swear to you that it is the best in the land.
We'll see about that. The man was guided out, ushering more praise as he left the building while you slinked deep into the throne from exhaustion. Finding this farmer's cow sounds like a side quest, if you ask me. Whoever that soldier got assigned to it, you know.
Oh, finally.
No! My ears are about to fall off! You groaned at the prospect of more non-essential issues. They walked in with grace befitting one of nobility, and a grin spread across your face as you looked up and recognized them. Aunt Marilyn! Uncle Esther! They gave their most careful and courteous bow.
Oh, I do hope you have the time to see us.
I always have the time to see my favorite family members. Oh, are you sure? I imagine you must be tired from all of your work today. Oh, just seeing the two of you has me feeling refreshed already. You leapt out of your chair and bounded down to the stairs to properly greet them, giving each of them a long and warm embrace. Ouch! As you let go, Esther had tugged on your ear. Hey, what was that for?
Just checking that your ears are still intact. Wouldn't want them falling off now, would we?
I have needles and plenty of string to sew it back on. You took a few steps back. No, they're just fine.
Really now? Because I think I see a little tear.
That's just your imagination.
Looks like everything is still in its place.
You sighed a breath of relief. Well, now that we know that your ears are in working order, we have so many things to tell you about our trip. As do I. What happened? When did the two of you arrive? You were so late from what your letters said that I was afraid of what fate might have befallen you. Oh, we moored into the harbor a little over an hour ago. It took some time to pass through the sea gate. Our ship was almost too big to squeeze through the passage. I heard it's the biggest ship ever built. I've been anxious to see it for myself.
That it is. The Syracusia. We'll be sure to give you the grand tour. As for what happened, we ran into some trouble at sea.
Were you caught in a storm? Oh, far worse. A terrible sea monster rose out of the water and attacked us.
A sea monster?
What, like a giant octopus?
More like a giant slithering head with teeth the size of your arm.
The two of you aren't pulling my leg, are you?
Oh, we swear by our beating hearts that we speak nothing but the truth.
My heart skips far too many beats just thinking about it. How did you guys make it out of there, then? Oh, I don't really know myself. We were fortunate enough to have a captain and skilled crew to help fight off the beast, but that didn't seem to be enough. We thought that this was going to be the end, sunk to the bottom of the deep blue. But as we prayed, a miracle happened. Whether it became bored or perhaps one of the crew members managed to deliver a painful blow, it ended up running away.
Needless to say, right after that, we wasted no time getting out of there.
Oh, I'm so glad the two of you are all right after that. Man, a sea monster. Oh, I thought those were just legends.
We thought it was a whale at first, but whales aren't nearly that ferocious.
Well, you guys are safe now. No need to worry about sea monsters here. Some peace and quiet is all we need after that.
I take it your father is quite busy as of late. Doesn't have time to greet his own brother.
Oh, right, they're brothers. Maybe their voices should sound a bit more serious. Similar. There are quite a few matters he has to address. I apologize on his behalf that he wasn't here to greet you. Leandros.
Leandros. Thank you so much for your help back at the docks. Those ruffians never saw you coming. It's my sworn duty to protect. I would lay down my life to keep you safe.
I see that you already knew of their arrival and decided against... I see that you already knew of their arrival and decided against informing me. You tapped your foot on the ground. You hoped to be the first one down at the docks to greet them, but instead you were stuck wasting the day away in a chair.
You were busy. I couldn't just take you away from your duties as king.
Prince. But that is besides the point. You can blame that one on us.
We wanted to keep it a surprise for you.
Oh, well, you guys did surprise me.
We didn't get very much time to talk back down at the docks.
I'm almost as surprised as my timer.
But from what I last heard, you two were traveling across Farhaven, correct?
Hey, we just learned about that place. And perhaps we'll learn more about this story and what it holds for us next time. Thank you guys for watching. This was a fun one. I feel like the story was kind of moving fast. Things were happening. I'm kind of intrigued. Nothing too crazy. I kind of wish I could keep going. I'm actually a little bit tempted. But my throat hurts. I'm going to try and make these episodes a bit longer these days, though, so... hopefully this one's close to about half an hour. Maybe 40 minutes is going to be the sweet spot. We'll see. Put in the comments below if you guys have a preference for the shorter or the longer ones. But, anyway, this got interesting. I mean, it was already interesting before and fun, but I wonder if there's more magic and drama and horror involved versus, like, which furry daddy I'm going to, date or something. So, interesting. I wonder what my choices affected too. I like the fact that there were a lot of choices in this. I think the past few visual novels I've been playing have felt kind of linear, which is totally fine. I enjoy all the narrations. But I kind of missed the sort of gameplay elements of actually choosing things and making, affecting the story. I just hope I wasn't making a fool of myself by not knowing anything. But regardless, we're going to have to get caught up with all these folks next time. Really hope you guys liked it. Again, any feedback, any other visual novel suggestions or other games, like I said, I'm always open to suggestions, comments, critiques. I really appreciate them all. I mean, the fact that I'm close to 700 subscribers, well, not exactly, but at least by the time we're recording this, I'm at like 620, which is still crazy. I gained like 100 in a week. That was nuts. So please subscribe if you really do like this stuff. I want to make more of it, and I definitely will be. So hopefully you won't be disappointed. But I'll cut my ramblings here. Thanks again for watching. Hope you guys all have a great day, a good night, a good evening, whatever it is for you. And we'll see you next time. Bye for now. Take care. He was a general leading more than half of Brahm's forces against Farahorn. Farahorn.